Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. Council President Debora Juarez won't be on the Seattle City Council next year, deciding not to run again after 2 terms. What's she most proud of? What were her biggest challenges? And what guidance does she have for a council coming in with 6 new members? Our exit interview with Seattle City Council President Debora Juarez next on Council Edition.
The times it was good, it was really good. The times even when it was bad, I reminded myself this is what leaders go through. This is what you're supposed to. It isn't all fun and ice cream socials.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. Council President Juarez, thank you very much for being here. I wanted to let you know I'm going to be collecting your key card at the end of this interview, so I hope you're ready for that. I did want to talk about this. You're not running for another term.
You got to wrestle me for it, buddy.
I know. It's going to take a while here.
You don't want that on TV.
No. But I just think about the different accomplishments that you've had over your past couple terms. The Indigenous Advisory Council, the work you've done to reshape the waterfront, the Iceplex, the Seattle Kraken's practice facility up there at Northgate, light rail expansion. It's a big list.
Climate pledge.
There's a ton of things that we could talk about here. Is there something that stands out to you that you're the most proud of, or how do you look at it?
Oh man, that's a tough question because I know you and I've talked about this before and being on your show.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the things that stand out for me as far as leadership has always been my kind of North Star, is that it's important to lead, but also lead behind brick and mortar. So the waterfront, the John Lewis Bridge, Climate Pledge Arena, Kraken Community Iceplex, the new community center we're going to get in Lake City, and then what we've done citywide, particularly with the waterfront. And, you know, I don't want to sound, because it's not all me. It's working with the executive, the city departments, and community. But I can't say there was one. I mean, there are some big moments, certainly when we were negotiating for the NHL to come here and the Climate Pledge, and certainly when we were wanting to make sure the Kraken Community Iceplex, and also the Seattle Storm Training Center, even though Stewie's not with us anymore, you know, she's in New York. But women's sports means so much to me, working with the Seattle Reign, Seattle Storm, Rise Above, women's sports, Native American kids. But I really like to shop around the city and work with district council members or where they had land and property for me as a leader, and I'm not saying this against any other leader, to build city and community is about building brick and mortar and creating jobs, not just taxing. And that's important to me. And I think I can actually, in good conscience, with a good heart, say we built some great stuff. We provided jobs for labor, building industry, iron workers, and I want to continue to do that.
Well, let me ask about this. You've seen a lot of challenges in your 2 terms as well. Is there a decision you wish you had back, or, you know, a moment in time where you said to yourself, I wish I could have guided the narrative a different way for the city council? Any thoughts on that?
I didn't think you were going to ask me that, but you had to. I was like, is he going to ask me that?
Yeah.
You know, that is such a difficult question. Maybe I'll do a follow-up show with you. I can't, because if I say no, then it sounds arrogant and like I think everything I did was right. If I say yes, I can't really. There are periods where I felt like, you know, we could have done more, where particularly on the taxing issue, on the head tax, but those don't just happen in a moment. They build upon weeks and months and years of coming to where you start at A, but working with community staff, community leaders, your colleagues, the executive, you start gelling an opinion, and then you arrive somewhere else. And so no, I can't really like pinpoint something. I wish I could. There's a couple times that I felt like I wanted to say, but as an elected, I needed to keep a level head and recognize that I represent not all of Seattle. I mean, we represent all of Seattle, but our voice for the region, our congressional delegation was important too, and I didn't want to harm their work and the things they were doing, and I didn't want to make it all personal either.
Thank you, and I'm sure there's a follow-up show there somewhere.
There is,
But let me talk about this. This idea of lead to leave. You've spoken about this before. It's a phrase attributed to our Uncle Billy Frank Jr., the late Native American activist and leader. We actually had a viewer email come in about your leadership style here. This is from Derek Belgard, who is the executive director of the Chief Seattle Club. He wrote this, and this is just half of the email. I'll make sure you get the whole thing. So Derek wrote this. You led with consistent values and principles and never missed an opportunity to punctuate your messages with refreshing doses of four-letter words. Words like home, safe, hope, love, and a few others we can't say on air. Council President Juarez, you not only paved a road for Native people to follow, but built structures to ensure that Native people can follow that road for years to come. I raise our hands in gratitude for your hard work, leadership, and friendship. I wanted you to talk about that, lead to leave, and what Derek just said right there.
Yeah, I'm really, that's very heartfelt from Derek. As you know, I was raised in Indian country between the Puyallup Reservation, the Yakima Reservation, and the Blackfeet, and I grew up in tribal council meetings where women were mainly leaders, and men as well. And I have to say this on a personal note, I learned about leadership differently than I think a lot of my colleagues. And in Indian country, Uncle Billy used to say that, you lead to leave, and you're bringing up this next set of leaders. You're instilling in them not only the mentorship and the pride, but love, humiliation, and humor. And then I added leave a legacy that is like brick and mortar.
Right.
Whatever it is that you can say, I was here with a group of people. I didn't do it myself.
Right.
And we built this. And you know how we built it? We built it with consensus. We built it with diplomacy. And we also built it with laughter and kindness. And so I kind of stepped into a world where leadership styles were different, even though I worked for a couple governors and did different things. I'm not obviously immune to the non-Indian world.
Yeah.
But I really, really embraced who Debora was and what I've learned as a Native American Latina woman about leadership, and some of my style was different. But one thing I've learned, and I've shared this, and I'll say it again because I know you want to hear this, where I come from in my culture, being direct and honest is a sign of respect. It means I can look you in the eye and I can tell you what I think, and that's not rude. And I notice that non-people, maybe non-Indians, I don't know, they find that that's rude to be so direct and so honest. But I'm giving you the respect that I'm listening to you, I'm hearing you, and I want to get to consensus, or I want to get to yes, and if I have to back off on my no, then I can do that. But the way you start is being honest.
Yeah.
And so when people, Seattle's known for the kind of hand-wringing, passive-aggressive, not saying what you mean.
Sure.
And my staff knows this, GTP, get to the point. Just tell me what it is. I'm not gonna hide the ball. I'm not going to play games. I'm not saying that I don't know how to negotiate or just kind of, keep things close to the vest. But at the same time, people deserve honesty, and I always wanted to give it to them, even if they didn't want to hear it.
Okay. Let me ask this question, because we have you leaving here. There's going to be 6 new members on the council next year. We got this email in from Brian, who asked this. What's your advice for the new city council coming on board? What are their biggest challenges ahead? Some thoughts about that. Well,
my advice to the new council coming on board is that they work together, and that they walk into each other's offices. And we could do that before 2020, and, well, not always. I had some colleagues that had never been in the office of other colleagues for like a decade.
Right.
I made it my point to always be able, there's not one office I couldn't walk into and talk to people. I always wanted to know where people were at. And my advice is to stay, and I know this sounds almost simplistic, and I'm not trying to be negative, but just to be kind and honest and open. And just recognize it's not about your base, it's not about your district, it is about all of Seattle, whether you're a business, a nonprofit, environmentalist, whether you're a conglomerate or you're a corporation, because at the end of the day, we all love this great city. And the people that are coming in, and besides the advice, is just remember to laugh and be kind. Go out and have coffee, talk things over. And I think I said this on your show a long time ago when I first got elected about the district system. It was really refreshing, and I learned, and this whole new group, by the way, isn't going to be burdened by an old system. They're all brand new districts, so they get it now. They understand the district system.
It's been established for a while now.
And I started out with that. And so I liked it that I could walk into like Councilor Herbold's office and say, hey, this is going on in West Seattle. I remember when all those trees got cut.
Yeah, right.
I was like, girl, where is this? What happened? So she's explained it to me. I had her come to committee. I could work with Sally Bagshaw, who was representing downtown.
Right.
And that's how we got all the waterfront stuff done in Climate Pledge. That was her district. She knew her constituents. And then I got to meet those people, and people I never would have met. And so the district...
Bob Donegan says hi, by the way.
Right, the two Bobs.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
The two Bobs. So there is some real synergy and beauty in representing a district, but as I said, and I learned this from Star Trek, yes, and I always use this line, but I've never said where I attribute it to, that I represent the city, but I honor the needs of my district. pothole, lights, homelessness, public safety, garbage pickup, lights.
Yeah.
That's the stuff because people...
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks.
Right.
Those are the calls we get, and they're legit. And so someone calls and says, you know, can you get a crosswalk here? Can you get a light here? Can you fix a sidewalk? I know where that is in D5, and I can call who's ever head of SDOT or whomever and say, look, there's a problem here.
Can you get a little more specific, though, on challenges that are ahead for this new council? I think about there's a big budget deficit they're going to have to reckon with. There's an issue with, okay, how are we going to enforce drug use and possession? There's a big debate over that in the council over this past year. Can you look at that, or are those the two challenges that are big that are ahead of them, or how do you look at the biggest challenges ahead for this new council?
You know, I don't know. I can't really answer what I think are the big challenges, but I can say this. We have taken it away. We've cleared the road for them on the big stuff, okay? We've set up this alternative system with 911, the public safety, passing the drug law, working with City Attorney Davidson, working with municipal court, the jail, and so there will be the standard challenges of any elected leader, right? But as far as, you know, I can't anticipate it isn't going to be anything different than any other elected, and they're all adults that come from professional fields that ran for their office, campaigned for 10 months, they're all being onboarded, they understand what their job is. I'm actually, and I know electeds say this a lot, but I actually am really excited to see this new council get to work and build on the stuff that these last councils have done.
Thank you. I want to make sure I ask this question, too, because you worked hard to establish the Governance, Native Communities, and Tribal Governments Committee. Do you worry that that committee goes away without you being there, without an Indigenous member on the City Council? No,
because that's why we created the Indigenous Advisory Council that is in the Department of Neighborhoods and staffed by Francesca, who I absolutely adore, who came from the Seattle Indian Health Board.
Right.
And so Francesca chairs that 9-member board. 4 of them are elected leaders from tribal governments, actual, you know, on council. And so I already know who, I'm pretty sure I know who's going to absorb that committee, and no, I'm not, because that was the whole point of me taking the IAC and institutionalizing it and having a staff where it will not go away, where they will provide guidance not only to the legislative branch, but working with Tim Rainan, who is the tribal liaison in the executive side. And Tim knows all these folks as well when he was on tribal council at Puyallup and legal counsel for Puyallup. Okay. So we've really worked up a great, I'm trying to think of a sports analogy that you would like.
That's all right.
Deep bench.
Sure.
A deep bench.
Oh, there you go.
What I say? I'm getting it now.
That's one of Mayor Harrell's too, I think.
By the way.
That's a whole other story. But it sounds like that committee is going to be there, and I think you were very intentional about this. Because you're not on the council doesn't mean that Native American issues, Indigenous issues are not going to continue to be looked at. I think that's an important part of it.
Well, that's an example of lead to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, I can stand up and, you know, have rallies and go on and on and on and slogans and T-shirts, but what do I leave behind?
Yeah.
And I can look back and say the IAC was created, it's funded, it's not going anywhere. They will tackle issues of missing, murdered Indigenous women and girls. They will tackle the issues of the Violence Against Women Act. They will tackle the issues of housing and working with Derek Bellegarde and all the other folks, Esther Lucero at the Seattle Indian Health Board. All of us are connected. We all know each other, and I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. I wanted to make sure I got back to this whole district piece because you have been such a passionate representative, advocate, defender of District 5 in North Seattle on your time on the council. We got a question that came in about that. Your old pal, Kevin Schofield from Seattle City Council Insight. He says he would love to meet up with you after the new year. Drinks are on him. Not that last part, but I made that up. But hopefully Kevin will figure it out with you. At any rate, Kevin asked this. What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about North Seattle?
Well, the biggest misconception, one of the reasons why I decided to run was I knew I was going to run for something at some point. I'm just glad we went to a district system. Is I think people think that all the issues, societal ills, if you will, or whatever, and everything that's unhappy or people aren't happy with happens south of the Ship Canal. And we've learned, and I've watched the statistics, and I think the Seattle Times did a story on it as well in the beginning. I don't know if they followed up. But we started out with 49% renters and 51% homeowners, and that now has switched. Yeah. And the growth there, I think people just didn't look north to see how much land there was, and connecting with North Seattle College and like Northgate Mall and the Simon properties. And because in my former job, what I did was economic development. So of course I made friends with all these huge corporate real estate landowners are like, what are you doing with this property? How can the city use it? And I think the big misconception is that somehow that it was old and stale and there was not going to be any more growth. And as you know, I fought hard for the 130th Street and worked on the north.
For light rail, yeah.
Yeah, for Northgate Rail too. And what people don't know is a lot of people live right in Shoreline and come to the city of Seattle to work. So when we got the numbers working with Mr. Rogoff when he was at Sound Transit and then Julie Tim and working for 130th, the numbers were off the charts on onboarding at Northgate alone and now with 130th. And then I got the statistics from the Lewickis on the Kraken Community Iceplex, and they anticipate 1 million visitors in 1 year. And we got 2 hotels coming up there working with the Simon folks.
Yeah.
And so when you have that kind of economic vitality, I just hope it sets an example for other districts, welcoming or not, hopefully more welcoming, not just for business, but for housing, to look at more type of housing, mixed income housing, affordable housing, and kind of get away from just we can only have single family zoning.
Right. Well, that's a big challenge ahead for this
It's
next
a big
council.
challenge.
How do you reckon with that one? Because you think about a city that's growing. I know I do too. How does that figure into the future of this city and what this council has on its plate for next year? Well,
it's going to have to be a big shift, and there's another whole story there, as you know, with redlining and how the city came about. Well, you can't grow more land, but you really have to recalibrate how you think about what a city looks like in being urban. You need green space. But you also need to recognize that this city is growing. We're a world-class city. We are the gem, I think, of the Northwest. And no offense to any other city in the state of Washington, but people come to Washington to come to Seattle. And now they want to live here. And we have tech here. We have a lot of great, good things here. And so we have to get away from the 1950s thinking that you can just have this huge lot and it's just yours and that's it. And I know that goes to the principles of private property, and I get that. But there's a new generation of thinking, this land can be for all of us. We can all have neighborhoods of that. And so I think that's important.
Okay. I did want to talk about this job, and I know for you and other council members, it's become a lot more challenging over the last decade. And I'm thinking back to 2020 when the council was in the middle of this debate over police funding. Protesters went to your home, threatening you, breaking into your car, all these awful things, defacing your house there. I guess, do you see Seattle as more dangerous politically right now or more polarized politically than when you took office?
Well, I think it started, it started, but I think President Trump really allowed and said it was okay. And we didn't just see it in the city. You're still seeing it nationally, right? You saw what happened to the folks who work in, like, the voter, school boards. Now it's commonplace to turn on, MSNBC or CNN or whatever and see people being violent, getting doxxed.
At some council meeting or whatever else. Yeah, right.
I'm hoping that we've reached a tipping point that now people are kind of coming back to, like, that's not okay. You can be angry at a council member, you can not like their opinion, but you don't get to come to their house at night with a mask on and a bullhorn and call them violent names and threaten them. I think that we've really pulled back from that. I think we were just in a dark place because I want it to be good for my children and your children and my grandkids. And I think we're moving back away from that. And I think this next election cycle is really going to set the tone.
Yeah, you were very forceful about your pushing back against that, and I know a lot of people criticized you at that time, but it just seemed important for you to draw that line, or how did you look at that? I know that was a very difficult time in your life there.
Well, it wasn't about, and thank you for that. I remember you and I talking during that difficult time. It was about drawing a line, but it was also something more about the humanity for me, is that when you start othering people, then that gives you permission to do violent things. And death and rape threats were just, I wasn't prepared for that. But the other part of it was, no one signs up for a job like that. And that's why I was worried that people wouldn't run for office. Because that's, in fact, I had I can think of at least a dozen people that wanted to run for office, but saw what happened to me and said, oh my God, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. I
can't have that. But it also was about, just when you say I kind of drew a line, this is something that's, hopefully it's not, it will always be conventional wisdom. It's just common sense.
Yeah.
You just don't treat people like that.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that we get away from that, and I think we are.
Thank you very much. I wanted to talk about what's next for you, and we actually got an email from a viewer about this as well, and that viewer is Mayor Bruce Harrell, who had this suggestion here. He wrote this: for your next gig, have the Storm offered you a position as mascot yet? You would make a great Doppler. What do you think?
Oh, mascot, really? Is that what Bruce said? Okay. Well, that's actually pretty funny because you know how Native Americans feel about mascots.
Oh dear. Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Step back. Yeah.
But no, I have not. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I have to look for a job.
Oh, come on. You've got
Why can't you and I have a show? No, I don't.
I'm sure we will.
I don't. I do not have a job.
You're not going to...
I'm going to get a job.
Attorney or something like that, or back to...
I don't... You know, I've been around long enough to like, okay, we're talking public defender, pro tem judge,
yes,
King County Superior Court judge, legal counsel to 2 governors, partner in a law firm. Then I run for office. It's like a lot of that stuff I've done, and I don't really want to go back to it, but I can tell you what I'm interested in. I'm interested in sports, Indigenous children. I'm interested in the intersectionality of sports, children. I work really well with Coach Wilkins. He's been a big supporter of mine.
Yeah, Coach Money.
And also, I like to build things. I like to build big things. I like big projects. And so even though, you know, I have my issues with developers or whatever, but when people and I see a vision together, we may have different ways of how we get there, but I like doing that because I think once you create that kind of, you have a vision and you have the brick and mortar and you create jobs and people come there, it creates vitality. It gives people worth to have a job. Yeah. And if I had a perfect city, it would be a city where people can just walk to their job. They can walk over here and drop off their kids, walk to their job, pick up their kids, go to the store, and walk home. That's my vision because I grew up in a neighborhood like that.
Right.
And I'd love to see that for the city.
And I think about that intersectionality you talk about, working with Indigenous kids, working with sports, et cetera. The work that you've done with REWA up in North Seattle and helping a number of kids actually get on the ice or see ice for the first time in their lives with some of these kids from North Africa, et cetera, that are out there.
English is their second language.
Right. But ice skating is their first. It's been really interesting to see that. Can you talk about that? Because I thought that was a very interesting part of your history, and I think your legacy, too, up in North Seattle. Well,
I want to give a huge shout-out. I hope she watches this. This is Susan Lee at REWA. But let me just say this. Before there was NHL, OVG, the Kraken, the community, we were working with Susan Lee and now Deputy Mayor Burgess on all the pre-K buildings. And I just had the idea, like, okay, once we start doing these pre-K buildings, we got the funding, the brick and mortar, kids can come here. We're going to have a second one. We are having a second pre-K building in D5. We have one in Rainier Valley. We have one on Beacon Hill. And working with Susan Lee, and, you know, OVG One Roof Foundation has been so good. They're like, okay, we're going to dedicate every Wednesday to bringing in these big buses and bringing these kids. And I've been there a couple of times. I think I was on your show telling you, lacing their little...
Yeah, tying up those skates,
But just watching all these parents out there from all these different countries, English is mainly their second language, but I don't even know how to say it without sounding corny. Watching them watch their kids get out there on ice was just amazing. And a quick little story. Yeah. Nice little kid. He could have been more than 3. I was standing next to Susan. I was on the ice, unfortunately, and they got it on camera. I did not want to be on the ice, but I went out there. I hadn't ice skated in probably 20 years. And he was holding on to me, and I thought for sure I was going to crush him. I thought I was going to fall. I was telling him to get off, but English is not his first language. Yeah. I had to holler at Susan and say, can you tell him in Chinese? And she did. And then he just immediately just bolted me, and he just like threw me away. But see ya. Yeah, exactly. But the point is, and then having Todd Lewicki come down and then and say hi to the kids, and just, I don't even know how to explain it. I wish people would go and watch how these, I know people are always mad at Seattle City Council and the letters we get, and they're always angry about something, but we really did some good stuff. And those are the kind of moments that I really will cherish and love, and I hopefully will continue to work with Susan Lee at REWA.
Got it. And turns out a few people had some ideas about what you're going to do next. We had another one of our viewers by the name of Councilmember Alex Peterson who wrote this one in. He writes this: "Thank you for your courage in choosing to lead the City Council during the past 2 years in hopes of healing the civic discord and righting the ship for our city. Now, if you finally open the delicious fry bread stand you promised, I could be available in January to pound the dough." That's from Councilmember Peterson. Any thoughts on that career path?
That's actually an ongoing joke that's been going on for 2 years between myself, Councilmember Peterson, and Councilmember Strauss. Okay. We're fighting about the streeteries and all the stuff. This is another example. Behind the scenes, I was like, no. And then we worked it out, and then so I was telling Dan, I said, if I can get so you're telling me I don't need a permit to open up my garage and make fry bread? And Dan's like, only if you hire me. I said, okay, Dan and Alex are going to be back there with the oil frying it. My job is just to be the pretty face in front to get you
employee number 1 and 2.
And 1 and 2, yeah. Huh. I'll make sure I pay them $15 minimum wage.
And I guess I got to ask, are you more Indian tacos, or you put the powdered sugar on top? Okay.
I'm gonna do. I don't do powdered sugar.
See,
that
I was
ain't
gonna
right.
say,
That ain't
no.
right. I know you want.
No. I'm not down with it either.
You ruined it. You know what you did to mac and cheese.
Yeah.
You know what y'all did to that.
Oh, I see.
Potato salad.
I see how it
the
is.
The bland ass potato salad. Did you ever
don't
watch
need that
Black
either.
Jeopardy?
Sure.
I want to do a Native American Jeopardy.
Okay.
So we don't put the powdered sugar on our fried bread.
Okay.
It's butter, maybe some honey sometimes.
Right.
Maybe a little jam.
And that's it. That's all you need.
And then we have the Indian taco, which
Right.
is a mix of, what I am, half Mexican, half Native American, and then we'll do the Indian taco.
You said it.
I did.
I guess I need to start wrapping up with you, but I think that your Native identity is such a big part of this job and what you are, and I wanted to open up the floor here to any words you wanted to say to people who live in Seattle, people who live in D5, people you've worked with on the council or the mayor's office. Any final thoughts to wrap up here?
Well, I think people forget that, my dad is first generation and was a truck driver and really big in the labor movement down in Modesto and Bakersfield. And, my mom and dad divorced, but I would spend time with my father. I have a huge family in Bakersfield, nieces and nephews, and I have a huge family on the Blackfeet Reservation and on the Yakima Reservation, and Puyallup for that matter. It isn't, I kind of, when people say, people of color or BIPOC, I always kind of like get a little cringy about that because I am so much more than that, just like you are, right? I guess what I want to say is, and I didn't really get a chance to say this last night at the party they had to say goodbye to us, but besides, I had a phenomenal staff. It's staff that makes you look good. It's your chief of staff, it's your comms person. They're the ones that make you look good on camera and prep you and do your memos. But I don't think people know, and maybe I should have said it more, this is one of the best jobs I've ever had. And it has been such an honor to represent this great city. I mean it, and I truly I am not a phony person. The times it was good, it was really good. The times even when it was bad, I reminded myself this is what leaders go through. This is what you're supposed to. It isn't all fun and ice cream socials. But I would do it again in a heartbeat, but it really is time to leave. You know what I mean? It's time for this next group to come in and say, these are the sensibilities in 2024 of our city. I ran in 2015. A lot has changed. And, I don't think I'm going to go away from politics. I think there might be something out there for me. But, I might want your job, too. I don't know.
Oh, boy.
It looks like it's pretty cush around here.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. Council President Debora Juarez, thank you.
Oh, man, thank you.
Always
a pleasure. And go Mariners, go Huskies.
All right, we'll see what happens. They got a big game ahead of them. Council President Juarez, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody watching right here on Seattle Channel. This is Council Edition. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.